Good morning, everybody. This is a live extreme weather update on Tropical Storm Elsa that has organized quite a bit upon a reemergence over the water after passing over Cuba and weakening a little bit, but it still is maintaining this tilted structure. I did see some discussions yesterday that maybe the disruption over land could lead to a less tilted structure. So good morning, everybody. This is a live briefing. We do have this convective explosion that you can see just to the east of center near the Dry Tortugas. This has happened so far this morning. A little bit of a convective burst here, which is east of the low-level center. So because of this westerly wind shear that's coming in from west to east, the low-level center is located on the west side of this cloud shield. The mid-level circulation is a little bit off to the east here. That's where we're getting a lot of the convection. But that also means that the worst conditions are located on the east side of the system. So as it heads off to the north toward the Tampa Bay area, and we have seen a bit of a shift to the east of this forecast track. I think that with a deeper, even though it is a tilted system, that convection extending higher up into the troposphere is starting to get influenced by those westerlies a little bit, and it's dragging that low-level center a little bit off to the east. And it looks like late evening at about 10 o'clock or so, 10 to 11 o'clock, this system's going to pass just to the west of Tampa Bay, and then those southwesterly winds are going to rip up Tampa Bay and bringing with it a 3 to 5 foot storm surge. And that's likely the most dangerous part of this storm. That and also the tornado threat across the central Florida peninsula. And I do plan to assess that tornado threat as well later on in this briefing if my internet can hang on. That's kind of the big issue here. If the internet will hang on, then we'll be dominating this briefing. Let's take a look at the visible satellite imagery, and we'll be able to see that low-level center get a bit exposed here. There you can see the spin. Look at that spin. You can see the banding in the low levels wrapping into that circulation, and you can see the gravity waves being caused by this convection to the northwest of the Florida Keys. Interesting little hole there as well. It's probably a shadow by a little embedded supercell storm within. You can see some transverse banding here. That's some robust convection, so definitely legitimate tropical storm conditions happening there. The Dry Tortugas were actually on the dry side of that storm, interestingly, and then here across the Florida Keys, definitely tropical storm conditions there experienced across the Keys. And this is going to continue lifting off to the north, gradually intensifying just a little bit. Looks like it could be about 65 to 70 mile an hour sustained winds. There is a hurricane watch in effect for the Florida Big Bend region all the way around, and but with this further east track, it looks like this region, Apalachicola, through this relatively unpopulated area of northwestern Florida, should be on the dry side of the system. But here, you're going to get those southwesterly winds on the southwest side of the circulation ripping in there, almost like a sting jet, as dry air wraps around the south side of that circulation. You get a little bit of evaporational cooling where that meets up with that convection. And that strong southwesterly jet coming in here is the reason why you're going to get that 3 to 5 foot storm surge. But look at that dry air wrapping around the circulation. That is another negative fact that's going to limit rapid intensification as this lifts off to the north, and westerly winds at 500 millibars coming in. Elsa's always had this tilted structure, but for different reasons. When it was ripping around the south side of that Bermuda High at a rapid speed in excess of 25 miles an hour, the trade winds below it were rapid out of the east, and you had relatively weaker winds aloft, and that wind shear impacted the lower portions of that tropical cyclone, leading to a tilted tropical cyclone with the low-level center kicking out to the west out ahead of it because of those easterly trade winds and then tilting up with height. Now that it's begun that turn off to the north, you might think that the center can become more realigned, but now it's interacting with the upper level low that's located over the central Gulf Coast region, and that's bringing with it westerly mid and upper level flow, leading to a tilted system exposed here on the western side, that low level circulation to the west of that convection. So it's not a very efficient heat engine right now, but if we're able to get this convective burst to wrap around that center and then get a more vertically aligned tropical cyclone, then we'll be talking about rapid intensification. But right now, that is not happening so far with this system. Let's take a look, though, at radar. Whoa! So we can see where that low-level center is located. That was my door slamming here. And these are where the worst conditions are being felt, right here. And this is a little bit on the northeast side of the center. You can see some of these convective elements trying to wrap around the north side of this system. And if this whole slug was able to wrap around that center, then we'd be talking about a rapid intensification type of a situation. But this convection is displaced off to the east there as we are looking at Key West, a Key West radar here. Let's loop this radar, and then you can see the effects of the wind shear. There you can see that center as those winds curl to more easterly and then even northerly along the western edge. This is basically the effective eye wall here, but the deeper convection is off to the east. And just to the west of Key West, we had sustained winds of about 50 miles an hour there, gusts a little bit higher. And these are those southwesterly winds here coming in. You can see them in this lower convection, gradually increasing with height, and then it hits this zone, this convergence zone here, and then you get that convective explosion. And this is located under those big time tops that you can see on satellite. But it's this portion right here of the storm, these southwesterly winds, this jet here coming in from the southwest, that when that passes over the Tampa Bay region tonight at about 10 or 11 p.m., you can see another little southwesterly jet here. That's going to take the water and pile it up into those bays, including Tampa Bay, a very storm surge prone area there. And that is going to lead to that 3 to 5 foot surge. And I'm also watching these bands up here, these storms further north over the Florida Peninsula. I think just ahead of this area, you're definitely getting a little bit of surface heating up there, and you're getting a dry slot coming in from the southeast. Basically a little subtle elevated mix layer that can wrap around these systems, locally enhancing the instability. And if that happens, it's possible that these could mature into supercell storms with a tornado threat, especially later on as we go through the afternoon and you get some more destabilization over the central portion of the Florida Peninsula. But it definitely is a lot more organized than it was after it passed over Cuba, starting to resemble that European model solution from yesterday and last night, showing even intensification into a Category 1 hurricane. But it's always likely going to stay a high-end tropical storm, maybe a Category 1 hurricane if we could get this convective slug to wrap around that center. Then it'll be more vertically aligned. But really you don't want to split hairs between a Category 1 hurricane scenario and a high-end tropical storm, because the impacts are going to be relatively consistent. Trying to see if we're going to be able to keep this stream going. It looks like it's working so far. I just had to change that cable a little bit, and we are rocking and rolling here with this live coverage. And then I'm going to be going live on Facebook too right after this. So here are the hurricane intensity models, basically showing a steady state scenario here over the next 24 hours leading up to landfall, about 50 to 55 knots. The global models, the European solution, the GFS, are more robust in intensifying this hurricane up until landfall, with the European model even showing a low-end hurricane, Category 1. But the hurricane intensity models basically keep it steady state, right at about 60 miles an hour, and then that rapid downturn into the circled area after it makes landfall. But impacts could also be felt across the eastern Carolinas upon recurvature, near or just to the east of the center. Basically, look at this thing as a strong surface low ejecting from Florida across the eastern Carolinas, eastern North Carolina, maritime region, or mid-Atlantic region, and then up to the Canadian Maritimes, right along the western and northwestern periphery of that Bermuda High that we talk about so much. And this Bermuda High was so intense that this storm was moving rapidly in those strong trade winds on the south side of that subtropical high, and then is now lifting off to the north on the west side of that Bermuda High and to the east of an upper level low. See if I can get this internet to work again. Yep, it's working a lot better. Maybe that cable is just a faulty cable that I had here. So this is the 6Z GFS, and when it started to look a lot similar to the European model, that is when the hurricane watches were issued overnight for the Florida Big Bend. But now that we have some deeper convection here on the east side, it does seem like we have a little bit stronger westerly wind shear. It's causing an easterly track, a little bit shifted to the east than we had yesterday. We thought it was going to be right up the Florida Big Bend zone to the east of Apalachicola there. Now it looks like it's going to be a little further east than that, a little bit closer to the Tampa Bay region. And look at the GFS. deep in this system. This is the 850 circulation. And of course, the convection is located on the east side of the system, bringing the dirty side and the worst conditions right over the Florida Peninsula, including right up to the Tampa Bay region. This is at 21Z, 5 p.m. Eastern. And as we get closer to 8 p.m. Eastern, you get those easterly winds over Tampa Bay, and then the storm surge arrives after that. Just as that center passes to the east, you start to get southwesterly winds there, funneling right up Tampa Bay, piling up that water 3 to 5 feet, surge up there, and then the system slams into the Florida Big Bend with those southwesterlies coming right up that concave shoreline. But this GFS solution, the 6Z, is very close to the official forecast track. It's not dissimilar from the European solution. Yesterday, that was so alarming. It was a bit of an outlier, but then the GFS has come on over to it. And it does seem like often these tropical cyclones will follow an average between the two solutions and the different models, which is why we look at those ensembles and even an average of the different members of the individual models. But it did weaken a little bit over Cuba, but it passed over that narrow zone in Cuba that's near Havana, where it's a little bit lower. It's to the west of the mountainous regions over central Cuba. And if a hurricane is able, or a tropical cyclone is able to pass over that little gap in western Cuba, then it can really start dominating. And a lot of times when those very intense hurricanes come in from the south and pass over that area of Cuba and then hit the Keys, that is where the scenarios that lead to those stronger hurricanes that will impact, historically have impacted the Keys. This one was a relatively tilted, weaker tropical cyclone, even when it started to move over land in Cuba. But this thing has been mainly battling the wind shear. And I do want to look at the tornado potential as well and see how it destabilizes over the Florida Peninsula out ahead of that rain band. There is a slight now for the entire Florida Peninsula, and I do think that tornadoes are going to be one of the big issues with this one. A risk for a few tornadoes will exist in association with Elsa. That includes Tampa Bay here. So let's take a look at what some of the conditions are looking like across the Florida Peninsula and assess that tornado potential. I would be chasing Elsa, but I'm watching Friday across Iowa for a tornado threat. So you can see this wind shear, the effective helicities there over the Florida Peninsula are in excess of 100 right now, and see how the strongest helicities are located in the front right quadrant of this storm. So the storm is down here, well to the northwest of the Florida Keys, and then you get this ramp up of 0 to 1. You gotta be kidding me with this internet. Reconnected. This internet is killing me, folks. And I just got it upgraded. Let's go back to radar really quick until we get that wrap analysis to fire back up again. Looks like it should be working still. Test. Yep, we still should be live. We'll crank it away here. And it does appear to be trying to wrap some of this convection around the center. It looks like some of that convection is starting to propagate into the wind shear, propagate up shear just a little bit. Based on radar imagery here. Latest still has 1,007 millibars, 60 mile per hour sustained winds lifting off to the north. Cape Coral, you're also going to get a big, probably a 3 to 5 foot storm surge. These locations, once those southwesterlies come in there and start piling that water into these bays, you're likely going to see a big surge as well here, south side of Cape Coral. You guys know those storm surge areas here. Also to the east of Englewood, likely going to get some piling up of the water when those southeasterlies move by. Sure seems like I'm getting throttled on this. And we're back. Pulling up the mesoanalysis here. Let's do this while we still have internet. So I do think that the wind shear is going to be there across the central Florida peninsula out ahead of the stratiform rain band. Even though the models are showing the greatest wind shear right near the low-level center, and you do have a bit of a tilted system, I still think that bands of supercells are going to develop within this cape here, 3,000 cape even across the central Florida peninsula this late morning, so we definitely are getting some destabilization. The wrap certainly does show that robust convective band lifting off to the north. And then look at that, bands of renegade supercells developing in the central Florida peninsula. Right as this stratiform rain band lifts off to the north, it's going to serve as a differential heating boundary, and we'll start to get bands of these supercells across the central Florida peninsula. A couple of those could also move east to west toward the Tampa area, and that's why we're about to get a tornado watch to be issued. You've got these east-southeasterly surface winds there across the central Florida peninsula. Looking at the storm relative helicity, it does look like a lot of that wind shear stays offshore, closer to the immediate center, and that dry punch coming around. So you're probably going to see a lot of supercell storms there over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But you still get about 100 to 150 0 to 1 kilometer shear over the central Florida peninsula. Look at that band right here in the central Florida peninsula moving northward, and that's likely going to be associated with some tornado warnings there. The wrap is picking up on this convective blob almost moving south to north, and then the easterly is remaining over closer to the center, so it's almost showing more of a decoupling and even greater tilting with time. Right now, though, you've got the greatest effective helicities just between the Keys and the Florida Peninsula there. That's likely where you're going to get those transient supercell structures located just over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. You can see how the wrap handles these supercell storms as well over the Florida Peninsula. And I would be chasing this system, except that I'm keeping a very close eye on the tornado threat in Iowa on Friday. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to head out to Iowa and chase those intense northwest to southeast moving supercells. So here you can see at 12Z, the HRRR has a good handle. It even had this little renegade supercell structure lifting off to the northwest at 12Z this morning. Let's step forward to 18Z, and you can start to see the development of some of these renegades over the Florida Peninsula. And the HRRR even starting to show a more vertically aligned system getting closer to 18Z. You don't want to use these convective allowing models for hurricanes, but definitely shows some supercell storms within that convective band. Also a little bit closer to that stronger wind shear. But we're interested in this area across central Florida to the head of that stratiform rain band. I think there's going to be a differential heating boundary that's going to develop. A little belt of dry air wrapping around the outside of this system. And I think that you're going to have some supercell storms across the central Florida Peninsula. Look at that. We're right at about 19 to 20 Z, about 2, 3 p.m. Moving east to west, even closing in pretty close to the Tampa Bay area there. And look at this convective plume wrapping all the way around the center. At least the HRRR shows that this system wants to become more vertically aligned. But that'd be pretty reckless to use the HRRR model to assess tropical cyclone structure evolution as we move forward. But these supercell storms I'm concerned about here across the central Florida Peninsula. We're going to be breaking these down live here throughout this the evolution of this system, assuming that we continue with internet there. Let's take a look at the 0 to 1 kilometer SRH. And you do get a little belt of some decent 0 to 1 kilometer shear too, well removed from the center and right along that differential heating boundary. So that could definitely be an area of interest for tornadoes. Not your traditional hodograph there, but it is supportive of supercells. Your 0 to 1 kilometer shear vector oriented southeast to northwest. Due northerly storm motions there, creating a near 90-degree angle there with your 0 to 1 kilometer shear vector. So plenty of streamlines vorticity to be ingested by those storms moving south to north there. Supercell storms in the central Florida peninsula. Looks like we're talking about 150 0 to 1 kilometer shear in the 0 to 1 kilometer layer storm in a storm relative sense here. So definitely decent hodographs for supercell storms and a tornado threat with that band. And I think it's going to evolve within this environment across the central Florida peninsula. It looks like a lot of this stratiform rain and cloud cover will kind of mitigate that low-level instability there. But usually the front right quadrant of these storms up in this area will have the most favorable wind shear. And these bands are going to be well removed from the center. Definitely is an unorthodox type of a setup. Looks like you get another band streaming into the Tampa Bay area there by about 4 or 5 p.m. Bringing with it a tornado threat as well. And the HRRR is in agreement with the other models too, bringing it pretty close to the Tampa Bay region. Late night tonight, 10 or 11 p.m. You get those southwesterly winds pumping up the bay there. And that will bring with it a 3 to 5 foot storm surge up into Tampa Bay. Nice feeder band as well, continuing to hammer the Cape Coral area there. Could even be some tornadoes here. The southeastern quadrant is in general a little bit less favorable for tornadoes. More of a rain producer here with those southwesterly winds, and also still some coastal flooding with these southwesterlies coming in on the southwest side of that circulation. But the tornado threat, I am most interested in the central Florida peninsula there with these bands of supercells going southeast to northwest throughout the area. Heading back over to the radar data, it does look like you're starting to get this to wrap around, trying to wrap around that center just a bit. You can see those northeasterlies. But it's really battling wind shear. No convection over this side of the storm. And that's because you have these westerly winds coming in the mid-levels of the atmosphere with that upper level low located over the central Gulf of Mexico. And it's these southwesterly winds that are going to be a big concern and going to cause some big storm surge as well. Some dry air wrapping in here. And you also have some big-time evaporational cooling that's helping to bring those winds down to the surface. And when those move over the Tampa Bay region late night tonight, that is going to bring with it about a 3 to 5 foot surge up into the Tampa Bay area. You guys know where those storm surge prone areas are located. Trying to see if I still got a stream going here. Thank you, Jesse Cat, for the super chat contributions. Much appreciated. Yeah, there is a little bit of a lag with this thing. My internet isn't the greatest. Looks like there could be looks good right now. Be right back. I'm gonna go grab some coffee here. So continue to run this stream as long as I have internet. Oh, I've already got it. Don't be too worried in Orlando. Really the impact in Orlando that you have to worry about is that tornado threat. But I think that the timing is such that really those supercells are probably going to develop in this area. Maybe even north of that. Maybe up toward Orlando, actually. Keep an eye out about 3, 4, 5 p.m. Looks like once this stratiform rain and cloud deck get a little bit further north, and just on the north side of that, you could get the development of renegade supercell storms moving east to west that could have a tornado potential. talking about 150 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative felicity up there. Decent photographs. Kind of an unorthodox tropical cyclone tornado setup. But it does look like this system is better organized right now than it has been throughout the morning, as we're starting to get some wraparound. Some of that convection is beginning to wrap around the center, which would mean more efficient latent heat release, greater pressure falls, and we could definitely be witnessing the intensification of this system, even into a Category 1 hurricane as it passes just to the west of Tampa. Right now, showing 65 to 70 mile an hour winds as it passes just to the west of Tampa. But that track to the west of Tampa at about 10-11 p.m. is going to bring those southwesterly winds right up the bay. A little bit earlier, probably about 6 p.m. earlier in the evening, you're going to get those southwesterlies coming up into the Cape Coral area, bringing with it big time surge, 3 to 5 feet as well. And even though this is a tropical storm, a lot of the impacts, most of the impacts are on the east side of it. And this moving up from south to north is just going to drag that dirty side of the system directly over the Florida Peninsula. Hi everybody, thanks for joining me here for this live weather report. There is a hurricane watch that has been issued for the Florida Big Bend all the way down to Tampa. And that's the European Model Solution, the GFS, are showing gradual intensification through the day today despite that westerly wind shear. So let's head on back on over to the GFS model, 6C GFS here, and I can show you some of that westerly wind shear that this system is going through. But you can see it on radar, you can see it on satellite. So here is the 500 millibar analysis. You've got an upper level low here, centered to the west over Louisiana, and basically a belt of southwesterly to westerly winds in the mid-levels. Level of non-divergence here. So you're definitely getting impacted. This tropical cyclone is getting impacted by these westerlies coming in here, causing a tilted vortex and causing a more exposed westerly side of this system. The low-level center is located on the western side of that convection. And that's how this system has been behaving throughout its life cycle, but it was tilted for different reasons before. As it was passing to the south of that Bermuda high, it had those strong trade winds at the low levels, relatively weak winds aloft in the troposphere, leading to a more tilted system, causing the low-level center to accelerate out ahead of it. And now that this system has turned off to the north, that effect is a little bit less, and that's why some of these models are showing some intensification. But now it's getting the westerlies from that upper-level low out ahead of it, and it's going along the western edge of that subtropical high. But these westerly winds in the mid and upper troposphere are creating a tilted system for different reasons. Sometimes the outflow structure can counteract this wind shear if it's a healthy enough tropical storm or a tropical cyclone, but in this case it's tilted, doesn't have prolific outflow right now, so it's really having a trouble counterbalancing that wind shear as it lifts off to the north. And that's going to be a counterweight to prevent rapid intensification with this system, so just a relatively slow intensification as it lifts to the north. Look at some of these other models too, as long as my internet will hold. Maybe I need to do and this is a great website here, tropicaltidbits.com. Fantastic visualizer for these models. And these are the 12Z runs. The official forecast takes it up a little bit higher than the envelope of the hurricane intensity models, which show basically steady state here. But it does, the official forecast, that black line does show an increase up to 60 knots there just prior to landfall to the north of Tampa, and then a rapid deterioration, of course, of the storm as it moves over land. But that's a higher than the rest of the hurricane models. The GFS and the European model show that more robust intensification. These were the 0Z last night's models. We're taking this thing right up to Florida Big Bend. It has adjusted a little bit further east now, so we could take a look at these hurricane models, which seem to have adjusted and really picked up well as to where this is going to make landfall. Very close to Tampa, just to the north of Tampa. less than 24 hours now. And then it lifts off to the northeast across eastern South Carolina, eastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, and anywhere along into the east of that center, there is some tornado potential with basically this strong surface low lifting off to the northeast, making landfall near the Florida Big Bend. There is definitely a convective burst as well. Let's take a look at the H-Wharf model on the Tropical Tidbits website. It has a good handle on the structure here. This is valid at 12Z this morning, so that would have been a couple hours ago. Does look to be a little bit faster with the storm. 1,006 millibar pressure. 15Z, 1,005 does show some intensification. This is right about now, so it is starting to show this band wrap around the system just a bit. We can look at radar, and it sure does look quite similar. The H-Wharf, it's incredible how these models do such a good job these days. And it is starting to show that wraparound. So the H-Wharf seems to have a good handle on this, likely intensifying. That pressure is likely starting to drop as we're getting some more effective latent heat release within this convective band that's starting to wrap around that center. So it does seem like it's starting to battle against that wind shear a little bit. We might be having some enhanced outflow of this convective band wrapping around the north side of the system, maybe counterbalancing, acting as a counterweight to that wind shear just a bit. And this is the new track, having it 60 knots right on approach here to the Florida Big Bend. Likely some big time surge being impacted up and down this coast with those southwesterly winds getting dragged up along the coastline. So the H-Wharf is doing a pretty good job of this system. Let's go back to it on the tropicaltidbits.com website here. Taking a look at it. Ooh, look at that. It almost looks like it has almost an occlusion. Definitely wraps that convective band all the way around. Likely a hurricane by this point. Dry air wrapping around, getting pulled into the south side of the circulation, almost like a sting jet there, wrapping all the way around. And then the H-Wharf shows it weakening a bit on approach to Tampa Bay. This is about 0Z tonight. Shows it intensifying on approach and then just a little bit of a weakening trend. But then look at these southwesterlies getting funneled up Tampa Bay here. This is at 3Z, about 11 p.m. That's when that 3 to 5 foot surge is going to arrive in Tampa Bay with those southwesterlies getting funneled right up that bay. Bit of a feeder band impacting the Cape Coral area still through the overnight. Probably some flooding associated with that. Maybe some tornadoes wrapping in here to the north of the center. And then the H-Wharf brings it back to the west a little bit, re-intensifying near the Florida Big Bend. Landfall tomorrow morning, whereas many of the global models are a little bit further right of this. This is the 6Z run last night, but still pretty impressive how accurate it's done with the structural evolution of this system to the north of the Dry Tortugas, and then coming in here with those southwesterlies getting funneled up Tampa Bay. Going back to Radar Omega, it does appear to be intensifying as it's lifting off to the north of the Dry Tortugas here. You can see this convection wrapping around the north side. Let's take a look at the satellite imagery again here. Ooh, look at that convective explosion try to wrap around. See it go up against the wind shear here? That's an example of that explosive convective burst here, kind of counteracting that westerly wind shear a bit, causing it to bubble up against the wind shear, going from east to west. Look at that. That's definitely showing that convection try to wrap around the center. Then you've got the dry air coming in on the south side here, almost behaving like a subtropical system a little bit. A lot of dry air in the Gulf out ahead of that upper level low. And that's going to kind of keep this system in check as it lifts off to the north, but definitely a convective burst that we're seeing. Look at it spiral east to west, and that's because the surface pressures are likely falling, helping to drag this convection in a little bit from east to west, and also a little bit of outflows, these outflow streamers as well, with that convective burst helping to counterbalance a little bit of that westerly wind shear wrapping around there. But this storm system is now to the north of the Dry Tortugas. Seems to be following what the 6ZH WRF was showing, with this convection trying to wrap around the center, and you can certainly see it on radar wrapping into those northerlies on the north side of the circulation. Does look like we have a little bit better of an internet signal here. Thank you everybody for tuning into this weather report. Definitely have a convective burst here with Elsa happening. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm going to continue to do these live updates as we go through the day. Not a ton of people interested this morning, but I'll fire up this live stream as this thing continues to head toward the Tampa Bay area. But I'm watching Friday very closely for tornado potential there, eastern Nebraska into Iowa. I think it could be a very interesting day for tornado potential. I'm going to be heading that way and, well, intercept those tornadoes. But I'm going to do a quick live over on Facebook here, and then eat some breakfast, take Gizmo out to take a dump, and then I'll be back live again as I go through this afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Never stop chasing.